Seconds separated him from a deadly bite, a consequence of disregarding a desperate elderly woman dismissed as insane. Preston Vance was the man who narrowly escaped that fatal moment. March 15th in downtown Minneapolis was supposed to be just another ordinary day, but it became a revelation. Death could lurk in an innocuous turkey sandwich, and salvation could come from someone typically ignored. Geraldine Hutch, or Jerry as she preferred to be called, became a guardian angel that day. At 73, with gray hair tucked under a faded purple beanie and wearing a worn coat, she seemed invisible. Her trembling hands, a sign of early-stage Parkinson's disease, gripped his wrist with unexpected strength, revealing an awareness of imminent danger. "That sandwich is poisoned," she whispered, her blue eyes piercing. "I saw him put something in it. Please believe me." An involuntary laugh escaped him. How else to react to the words of a homeless woman he'd just given 20? The Turkey Club sandwich from Benson's Deli, wrapped in white paper, exuded the appealing aroma of bacon. For 5 years, it had been Preston's consistent choice. Roderick, the owner, knew the order by heart: extra bacon, honey mustard, toasted wheat bread, lettuce and tomato on the side. Such was the customer's preference. 20 minutes later, on that same sidewalk, paramedics were loading a body into an ambulance. A white sheet covered Marcus Tillman, while his wife Jennifer sobbed inconsolably on a police officer's shoulder, and his children wondered why Daddy wasn't moving. Marcus had bought a roast beef sandwich from the same deli 15 minutes after Preston left. 3 bites taken in his car while waiting for his family proved fatal. Tests revealed synthetic tetrodotoxin in the sandwich, capable of killing a healthy adult in less than an hour. Police noted the poison was colorless, odorless, and undetectable without lab analysis. The culprit was apprehended only thanks to the vigilance of Jerry, a woman whose warnings 3 other customers had ignored. But before diving into the details, it's necessary to understand how a chemistry professor ended up homeless on Franklin Avenue, and an unemployed software developer became a key witness in a high-profile poisoning case. To unravel this story, we must return to that fateful morning when Preston's life was already spiraling downwards, and the $20 in his wallet presented a choice: food or helping a stranger. It was then that the warning came, and 30 seconds of deliberation changed everything. Sometimes, the difference between life and death isn't about strength, speed, or luck. Sometimes, it lies in recognizing that the person society tells you to ignore might be the only one who truly sees. The rejection email from Technova Industries arrived at 9:47 a.m., just as Preston was leaving their gleaming downtown office. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates whose experience better aligns with our needs. 3 interviews, 2 coding tests, and a presentation on improving system architecture, all for a canned response that took no more than 5 seconds to send." It was his 3rd rejection this month, his 7th since the startup he'd worked at since January had folded. Standing on the sidewalk, Preston checked his bank account again, already knowing the outcome but unable to stop himself from the self-inflicted torment. He tormented himself with thoughts of financial hardship, like a cornered predator. He had only $342 left. There were just 12 days until his rent was due, and the $800 needed seemed an impossible dream. His sister Melody, like a persistent fly, had texted him 4 times that morning, asking for help buying school supplies for her kids. He stubbornly ignored her messages, as admitting he couldn't help his niece and nephew felt like swallowing shards of glass. The walk to Benson's Deli was only 15 minutes, but he'd made it so often his feet seemed to know the way by heart. He passed the stately courthouse, where lawyers in expensive suits bustled, exuding importance. Then he crossed a small park where office workers enjoyed their lunch breaks in the sun. Finally, he walked down Franklin Avenue, where buildings grew older and faces more worn. Benson's stood on the corner like an unyielding monument, there since 1987. Its red brick facade and sign, lovingly repainted by Roderick every spring, gave it a feeling of comfort and stability. "Preston, my old friend," Roderick exclaimed as he stepped inside. The bell above the door, like a loyal companion, chimed its familiar 3 off-key notes. "Let me guess, turkey sandwich? Extra bacon, honey mustard, lettuce and tomato on the side, as always?" "You read my mind," he replied, forcing a smile despite his gnawing despair. Roderick was already deftly working his hands, like an experienced conductor leading an orchestra of ingredients. His movements were honed to automation. He'd been making sandwiches for 3 decades. "You look worn out, son. Still looking for work?" Another rejection. "They like my ideas right up until they don't." "That's their loss," Roderick cut in, skillfully slicing ripe tomatoes. "You'll find something. Good people always do." He desperately wanted to believe those words, but the bitter truth was that good people were sleeping in their cars all over Minneapolis, standing in endless lines for free food. Being good didn't pay the rent or turn off the nagging check engine light that had glowed on his dashboard for 2 months, like an ominous omen. Behind Roderick, he noticed a new employee working at the prep station. A skinny guy, about 22, he exuded nervous energy, like a live wire. He kept glancing over his shoulder, quickly preparing several sandwich orders. "New guy?" he asked. "Colton quit on Monday, and this guy, imagine, he has a chemistry degree, says he's just working part-time while he decides where to go for grad school." Roderick shook his head, expressing his bewilderment. Kids these days, with their fancy degrees, working in delis. No offense, Preston. None taken. We all do what we have to survive. He paid for his sandwich, meticulously counting each bill. After this purchase, he had only $27 left. Comfort food had become an unaffordable luxury, but sometimes it was necessary to surround himself with familiar things to not completely lose touch with reality. The weight of the sandwich in his hand felt tangible, real, unlike everything else in his life that seemed to dissolve into thin air. Outside, the March wind cut through his thin jacket. That's when he noticed her. A woman sat against the brick wall, about 10 feet from Benson's entrance. A piece of cardboard leaned against her knees, like a shield protecting her from the indifference of passers-by. "Any help, God bless," read the sign, written in neat black marker. The letters were clear and sharp, as if the sign had been made quite recently. She wore a purple knitted beanie, hiding gray hair, perhaps white from age and city dust. Her army green coat was patched in places with fabric of a different color, but it was impeccably clean. For some reason, it struck him as important that she had taken the time to keep it clean. Her hands were folded in her lap, and he noticed them tremble slightly. She didn't address passers-by, shake a cup, or seek sympathy in their eyes. She simply sat, existing, waiting for a miracle. Something about her jawline reminded him of his grandma Opal, who had raised him after his parents died tragically in a car crash when he was just 12. The same determined posture, the same way of holding her chin high, even when the world around her was falling apart. Grandma Opal had passed away 2 years ago, but he still found himself reaching for his phone to call her when things were especially bad. He took out his wallet and looked at the remaining $20 and $7. He saw the $20 and $7 bills, sharp deals, each representing its own world of possibilities. $20 was a week's worth of gas, a chance to grab coffee for an important meeting, avoiding a 4-mile walk to his sister's house when she needed help. But his gaze fell on the woman's trembling hands and her carefully lettered sign, which seemed to outweigh his personal needs. "Here," he said, holding out the bill. "Get yourself something warm." She looked up, and her eyes held a crystalline blue he'd never seen before. Jerry took the money with both hands, as if verifying its authenticity. Then her gaze, piercing and scrutinizing, lingered on his face, as if she were trying to commit every detail to memory. "You are very kind," she said in a steady voice, contrasting with the tremor in her hands. "What's your name?" "Preston," he replied, shifting his weight, ready to continue on his way. "Prez," she repeated slowly, as if tasting the name. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the sandwich in his hand, and the woman's expression changed abruptly. Color drained from her face, and he thought she might pass out. She lurched forward, her trembling fingers gripping his wrist with unexpected strength. "Don't eat that sandwich!" Her voice broke with desperation. "Please, throw it away right now!" Instinctively, he tried to pull his hand free, but her grip only tightened. "Woman, what are you talking about?" "I saw him. The young man who works there. He put something in your food." Her eyes darted anxiously between his face and the sandwich, genuine terror in them. "Roderick has been making my sandwiches for 5 years. He would never—not him." The other one, skinny, nervous, always looking over his shoulder. This morning, he added something to several sandwiches. I watched from the window. The image of Colton, the new employee working at the prep station, flashed in his mind. The guy seemed jumpy, but he'd attributed it to first-week jitters. You're saying Colton poisoned my sandwich? That's absurd. Why would he do that? I don't know why, but I saw it with my own eyes. Jerry's voice dropped to a whisper. He had a small vial with a clear liquid. He was very careful, very methodical. 3 drops into specific sandwiches. Then he photographed the receipts with his phone. A chill ran down his spine, but common sense immediately took over. This woman was homeless, possibly suffering from a mental disorder. She could be having a paranoid episode. Perhaps she heard something, and her mind twisted it into something sinister. He'd worked downtown long enough to know how street life could distort reality. I appreciate your concern, but I think you're mistaken, he said, trying gently to free his arm. You think I'm crazy? It wasn't a question. She released his wrist and leaned back against the wall. Everyone thinks that. That's why he chose this spot. Who would believe a homeless woman? His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out with his free hand, expecting another rejection or a request from Melody for money. Instead, a message popped up from his brother-in-law, Shane Kurtz. Shane was a detective with the Minneapolis police, and they rarely communicated outside of family gatherings. Hey, can you call me back? We've got a weird poisoning case happening at local delis. Your tech skills might be useful to track some digital evidence. The words seemed to freeze before his eyes. Poisonings, delis, plural. Jerry must have noticed the change in his face because she leaned forward again. Your phone just vibrated about poisonings, didn't it? I can see it on your face. How do you know? Because I've been watching this corner for 3 months. I see patterns others miss. This guy has only been here 5 days, and every morning he does the same thing. Comes in early before opening. Always carries a messenger bag, which he takes straight to the bathroom. Always works the prep station, even though he was hired as a cashier. Always photographs specific orders. The deli was filled with its usual hustle and bustle, the cash register's chime mixing with hushed customer conversations. In the corner, like a shadow, sat Jerry, the homeless woman whose days were spent observing life at Benson's Deli. Sitting beside her on the cold concrete, he felt a treacherous tremor in his knees. Tell me everything you saw this morning, he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He came in at 6:45, Jerry began. Roderick usually doesn't arrive before 7:15. I saw him open the door with his key and go straight to the bathroom with a bag. When he came out, he had a small bottle in his hand, like eye drops. Then he prepared 3 sandwiches for the morning orders, the ones people call in ahead of time. He added 3 drops to each sandwich, then sealed them carefully. Everything was done very precisely and cautiously. Why didn't you call the police? He asked, not understanding her inaction. She gave a bitter laugh and pointed to herself. From what phone? And who would believe a homeless woman claiming she saw someone poisoning food? They'd think I was just trying to harm the establishment that won't even let me use their restroom. Without losing a second, he dialed Shane's number. He answered instantly. Preston, perfect timing. Can you? I'm at Benson's Deli on Franklin Avenue, he interrupted. Something's happening here, something really bad. Don't eat anything here. Shane's voice was sharp, professional. We've had 3 hospitalizations this week, all linked to different delis. We suspect someone is testing a new synthetic poison. All victims ate sandwiches from various downtown establishments. He looked at the wrapped sandwich in his hand, then at Jerry. Her clear blue eyes stared back with horrifying understanding. There was no trace of madness in them. Shane, I think I know who's doing this, and I'm holding one of the poisoned sandwiches. Don't move. Don't let anyone eat anything from there. I'll be there in 8 minutes, Shane commanded. Thoughts raced through his mind. 3 hospitalizations. Shane said 3 people were already in the hospital, and he was holding evidence of attempted murder. Inside Benson's, Roderick was cheerfully serving a family of 4. The father was reaching for his wallet, while 2 children happily bounced nearby. We need to stop everyone who's about to eat here, he told Jerry. Come with me. They won't listen to me, she replied, but she still rose and carefully tucked the $20 bill into her coat pocket. They'll listen to both of us. He pushed the door open, and the familiar chime of the bell now sounded ominous. Roderick looked up and smiled, but the smile vanished as soon as he saw his face. Behind him, Colton froze at his workstation, a knife suspended over a tomato. "Roderick, you need to stop serving food immediately." "Preston, what's going on? You're scaring my customers." He gestured to the family, who were looking at them with alarm. "There's been a contamination," he said, trying to choose his words carefully to avoid panic. "My brother-in-law is a detective. He's on his way. Nobody should eat anything until he gets here." "That's absurd," Roderick exclaimed, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "My kitchen is clean. We follow all health codes." Colton carefully lowered his knife. "Maybe we should listen to him, Mr. B. Better safe than sorry, right?" His voice was even, too even, as if he'd rehearsed this moment. He watched Colton's hands closely. They weren't trembling. A man just accused of poisoning food should be nervous, flustered, embarrassed. But Colton was calm, already methodically untying his apron. "You look like you're ready to close," he told him directly, "like you were expecting this." "I just don't want anyone to get sick," Colton replied. His eyes darted to the back exit, assessing the distance. Jerry stepped forward and with a trembling hand pointed at Colton. "I saw you this morning. You came in early. You put something in the sandwiches." Colton's composure wavered for only a moment, his eyes widening before he regained control. "This homeless woman is clearly not well. Are you going to believe her over me?" "The homeless woman," Jerry said quietly, "has a PhD in chemistry from the University of Minnesota, and I know what meticulous lab technique looks like, even when it's being used to poison people. Eloquence can serve both noble and base purposes, even to the point of deliberate poisoning." The silence that followed these words was thick with tension. Roderick's gaze darted wildly between those present, his face reflecting a range of emotions, from confusion and disbelief to all-consuming horror. The family instinctively retreated towards the door, the mother clutching her children tightly as if trying to shield them from an invisible threat. "Everyone, evacuate immediately," he said decisively, allowing no argument. Colton, like a shadow, bolted for the back exit, but years on the football team had left their mark. Despite a sedentary lifestyle and some extra pounds, muscle memory kicked in. He intercepted him at the door, pinning him against the wall with a powerful shoulder slam to the stomach. The messenger bag slid from Colton's shoulder and fell to the floor. "Let go!" he cried in desperation, trying to break free from his grip. "You won't prove anything. This is assault." "Perhaps the contents of your bag will prove something," he replied, not loosening his grip. "Or the phone records with pictures of receipts, or the lab results from this sandwich I'm holding." Roderick, having ushered the family outside, stood frozen at the front door, holding it open as the sounds of approaching sirens grew louder. "Preston, what the hell is going on here?" Shane burst into the deli, accompanied by two uniformed police officers, hands resting on their holsters. "Police, everyone stay where you are," one of the officers commanded. "That's him," he pointed at Colton, still holding him against the wall. "Check his bag." One of the police officers pulled Colton aside and handcuffed him, while Shane, donning latex gloves, carefully opened the bag. Inside, meticulously wrapped in bubble wrap, were 3 small vials of clear liquid and a notebook filled with chemical formulas and timestamps. "What is this?" Shane asked, holding up one of the vials. Colton remained silent, his face pale, but his jaw clenched. "I demand a lawyer." "You'll get one," Shane assured him, "after we analyze the contents of these vials and compare it to the poison that put 3 people in the hospital." "3 people?" Roderick's voice trembled. "My food poisoned 3 people?" "It's not your fault," he quickly reassured him. "He abused your trust." Shane was on the phone, calling in a hazmat team to decontaminate the deli. "We need to identify everyone who bought food here this morning. Provide the receipts. Check the CCTV footage. Every second counts." Jerry, who had been silently watching from outside the window until this moment, suddenly spoke. "Turkey sandwich for Preston, roast beef and cheese sandwich for a man named Marcus, and a veggie wrap for a woman in a blue coat. Those are the 3 I saw him serve this morning." Shane looked at her in surprise. "You saw all of that?" "When you spend every day in the same place, you start to notice details. People think if you're invisible, you don't see anything. But it's the opposite. I see everything because no one notices me." Colton, who had been silent until now, spoke with bitterness in his voice. Everything was supposed to be controlled. Small doses documented results. My faculty advisor said I needed real-world data. For your dissertation? Shane's voice was icy. You poisoned people for a research paper? It's about undetectable toxins in the food industry. The doses were calculated to induce symptoms without irreversible effects. Without irreversible effects? Shane's face went pale. He looked at his phone, reading a newly received message. Marcus Tillman died 40 minutes ago, a father of 2. This is murder, you bastard. The word died hung in the air, like another poison, invisible yet deadly. Colton's face contorted, his academic composure crumbling. No, that's impossible. The dose was calculated with high precision, 3 mg. That should have only been enough for mild stomach upset and temporary numbness. You killed a man, Shane said in a deathly quiet voice. Marcus Tillman was eating his sandwich in his car while his wife and kids waited for him. He died before the ambulance arrived. He was still holding his sandwich. The white paper wrapper now felt like proof of his narrow escape from death. Shane, this needs to be thoroughly investigated. He marked them somehow, he said, pointing to the evidence. Shane, gloved, carefully took the sandwich and examined the wrapper under the bright fluorescent lights. And there it was, a barely perceptible mark, a small cross drawn in pencil in the very bottom corner. So you were tracking them this way? By these marks? Colton remained silent, but his notebook was ready to tell its story. Shane quickly flipped through the pages, filled with meticulous notes, precise timestamps, complex chemical formulas, and a detailed tracking system. Each cross corresponded to a specific toxin variant and its dosage. According to the notes, his sandwich contained something called synthetic tetrodotoxin, which had been ingeniously modified to evade detection in standard toxicology screens. You weren't just poisoning people, Shane stated, reading excerpts from the notebook. You were conducting a carefully controlled experiment, different toxins, different doses, tracking recovery times and symptom manifestations. This was meant to advance food safety science, Colton whispered, as if justifying himself. If we could understand how easily toxins can be introduced and how they manifest, we could prevent real attacks. By performing those very real attacks? Roderick sank heavily into a chair, his face ash gray. I trusted you. I gave you keys to my restaurant. Soon, a decontamination team arrived, their white hazmat suits turning the deli into something out of a crime thriller. They began meticulously bagging everything, every sandwich, every mustard container, every cutting board. Roderick's 30-year reputation was now being sealed into evidence bags. Shane's phone rang again. He answered, and his face darkened with each word spoken. Just got reports of 2 more hospitalizations. A woman named Catherine Marsh and a teenager named Devin Williams, both ate here this morning. Jerry stepped forward. The woman in the blue coat and the kid with the skateboard. I tried to warn them as they left, but they quickened their pace when I approached. You tried to warn others? He asked her. 3 before them. A woman crossed the street to avoid me. A teenager put in his headphones. An older man threatened to call the police if I didn't stop bothering customers. She cast a look of undisguised contempt at Colton. He chose this spot perfectly, a corner where someone like me sits, someone everyone tries to ignore. Shane was now coordinating with the hospital, reading information from Colton's notebook. We need to tell them exactly which toxins were used. Catherine Marsh received something called batricotoxin. Devin Williams received a modified ricin compound. He looked at Colton with disgust. You gave a 16-year-old ricin? Modified ricin? Colton corrected as if it made a difference. The protein structure was altered to reduce lethality while maintaining symptom manifestation. Tell that to Marcus Tillman's wife, Shane snapped back. Meanwhile, local news vans were pulling up to the building, their satellite dishes extending skyward like mechanical prayers. Through the window, he saw Jennifer Tillman on the sidewalk, still in the same clothes as that morning, talking to a reporter. Her children stood nearby, the elder holding the younger's hand. My husband just wanted lunch, she said, her voice carrying through the glass. He texted me that he was grabbing a sandwich and would eat it in the car. 20 minutes. That's all. 20 minutes and he was gone. Colton watched her through the window, and finally, reality seemed to crash down on him. I didn't want anyone to die. The calculations were precise. I tested the formulas on myself in microdoses first. You tested poisons on yourself? Shane asked, disbelieving. Of course I'm not a monster. I needed to understand the progression of symptoms. He rolled up his sleeve, showing small scars on his forearm. I tried each compound first, but the therapeutic window must have been narrower than I calculated. Perhaps Marcus had some underlying condition. Or perhaps the sandwich sat too long and the compound's concentration increased. The extended waiting time led to the concentration of the dangerous compound. Jerry, however, offered a different perspective. Perhaps the young man, blinded by his own hubris, had dabbled in forces he couldn't control. Chemistry, she said, wasn't just equations on paper, it was people's lives, and that wasn't something to play with. At that moment, paramedics wheeled Catherine Marsh past the window, conscious but with an oxygen mask on her face. Shane confirmed she would survive but would require dialysis due to kidney damage. Shane, addressing Colton, stated that his actions qualified as 4 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of murder. His scientific work had, in essence, become a life sentence. Before he was led away, Colton turned and looked at him, revealing that he was meant to be the 15th on his list. The tetrodotoxin variant he developed was his most complex work. First, there would be a tingling in the lips, then paralysis spreading inward from the extremities. His mind would remain clear, even as his body failed. Complete respiratory arrest was expected within 53 minutes. He looked at the sandwich, now an exhibit, then at Jerry. 53 minutes, less than an hour separated lunch from death, prevented by a homeless woman everyone typically ignored. 3 weeks later, he sat in a crowded courtroom, watching Colton's sentencing. 25 years to life for the murder of Marcus Tillman and 4 counts of attempted murder. Colton's university advisor, sitting in the back row, testified that he had never approved of, nor even known about, his students' research. The judge called it one of the most callous displays of academic hubris she had ever encountered. But the true hero of this story sat beside him in the courtroom. Jerry was dressed in a navy suit, bought with GoFundMe donations raised for her interviews. Her hands still trembled from Parkinson's, but she was now receiving the necessary treatment thanks to the health insurance that came with her new position at the University of Minnesota. The story exploded in national news. The headline, "Homeless Professor Saves Lives," changed everything. Journalists, delving into Jerry's past, uncovered Dr. Geraldine Hutch, a former head of chemical safety research who had lost everything to a devastating addiction after her husband's death in 2019. The university that once employed her contacted her within days, offering her a path back through rehabilitation and a position focused on lab safety. The GoFundMe raised $200,000 in 72 hours. People who had walked past her for months suddenly remembered seeing her there and felt guilt for every time they had crossed the street or pretended to be on their phones. After the sentencing, Jerry told him that he had given her not just $20, but dignity, by stopping and listening to her when everyone else walked by. His sister Melody was there with her children, Jasper and Thalia. They were preparing a school report on everyday heroes, and their teacher had invited Jerry to speak to the class. Thalia asked if he still had lunch at Benson's. He replied that he did, every Thursday, and now Roderick made the sandwiches himself. No more chemistry students. And Jerry joined him for lunch. Roderick had almost closed the deli after everything that happened, but the local community rallied around him. He wasn't to blame for Colton's actions. Everyone understood that. Moreover, he himself was a victim. Now, he conducted thorough background checks on every employee and had installed cameras covering every corner of the kitchen. Jennifer Tillman approached them as they left. Her children lagged behind, still trying to adjust to life without their father. She thanked Jerry for ensuring her husband's death wasn't in vain, as she had stopped that monster from killing others. Jerry replied that she regretted not being able to save him, and her eyes filled with tears of gratitude and relief. "You didn't give up. You tried to reach people, warned them of the danger. That's a feat, more than anyone else did in this situation." A few days later, something unexpected happened. Technova, the company that had previously rejected him, suddenly reconsidered and offered him a job. It turned out that the news reports, which mentioned his name in connection with the high-profile criminal case, had impressed them. His ability to be a key witness, and more importantly, his willingness to listen to a voice others ignored, convinced them that he possessed the valuable judgment they sought in candidates. However, the most significant changes happened on a personal level. Now, every Thursday, he and Jerry meet for lunch at the cozy Benson's Deli. She enthusiastically talks about her chemistry students at the college where she now teaches part-time. And every semester, she begins her first lecture with the same message. $20, she says, solemnly holding up the very bill he once gave her, which she now keeps framed as a talisman. That's all it took for one person to see me as human again, and that simple act of humanity saved not only his life, but countless others. Chemistry isn't just about compounds and reactions. It's about observation, patience, and understanding that knowledge can come from the most unexpected sources, even from someone sitting on a street corner asking for help. Her old cardboard sign, inscribed with "Any help, God bless," holds a place of honor in her university office, next to her PhD diploma. Both items are equally significant and essential to her story. Preston's attentiveness became a legend he shares with anyone willing to listen. And it's a true story that changed his life. For angels don't always wear wings. Sometimes they come to us with weathered hands and cardboard signs, sitting in places we prefer not to look, yet seeing what we're too busy to notice. Sometimes salvation comes from the person we almost walked past, unseen. Surveillance footage from that fateful day revealed the full truth. 3 people ignored Jerry's warnings before he stopped and listened. 3 people who might have died because it never occurred to them that wisdom could come from someone who looked like her. Marcus Tillman might still be alive if someone had paid attention sooner. Colton's research notes were meticulously studied by the FDA and CDC and were ultimately used to develop new methods for detecting synthetic toxins. Paradoxically, his atrocities led to something good, but it was Jerry who made it possible. She was the one who observed, who warned, who desperately tried to save lives, even when no one believed she had anything valuable to say. Now, every morning, when he passes someone asking for help, he remembers that that person sees the world from a different angle. They notice what others miss in their rush towards something important. Sometimes, they are the only ones truly paying attention. And sometimes, that attention is the difference between life and death.